Good morning and thank you for joining us here in Lisbon Congress Center, and thank you for joining us online on Radiodays Day 3 on track 2. This session is called The Rise of Talk Radio. My name is Olli Junes and I'm honored to host this session, and we have three wonderful professionals here from around Europe. I'm sure we'll get loads of pro tips, new ideas and new angles on how to make a best possible talk radio. We have Kamila Ceran from TOK FM Poland. Welcome, great to have you here.
Hello.
And you work as a editor-in-chief and as a program director. And Nikolaj Thyssen from Danish radio, P1, which translates to P1, I guess. And you are head of the channel, the news, current affairs and arts. Sounds pretty much right. Great. And we have Estelle Cognacq from France Info, which is 24/7 news radio in France. And you are working as a head of information and editorial director.
I do.
And this is an interactive session. So you will be part of this 45 minutes during the whole session. Pretty much it works like that you raise your hand, and if you are watching this online, you can use the Swap Card app and ask your questions there. And our wonderful technical staff will approach you here. And it seems that almost every one of you is wearing masks, and that's the way it should be. I think in online viewing experience, the mask is pretty much optional. But please wear it and during the questions you are asking. So just raise your hand when you find an interesting topic you want to ask about, and the microphone will be taken to you. But for a start, let's have a short channel introductions so we know where they come from and what kind of channels they are representing. So could you tell us the most important promise to your audience? What is your channel's target group and maybe your channel slogan, because it sums up everything. If you could start, Kamila.
Okay, so TOK Radio is part of Agora Radio Group, and we are a TOK and News radio station. Our liner is listen to understand, because we try to explain the world, the culture, the politics, whatever, to our listeners. Our daily audience is about 1 million people. We broadcast in 23 biggest cities, over 200,000 people in Poland. And our audience share is only 3%, but in our technical reach, it's like 8–10%. So it's pretty unique for a talk radio to be so high and to compete with the biggest radio stations like Bauer radio station in Poland or nationwide radio stations.
Yes, Nikolaj, if you could continue.
Yeah. Just a sort of small correction to begin with. I'm head of P1 right now, but not really, because our board of directors just took a major sledgehammer and smashed it into the organization. And it's what you would call a daring move. So we sort of totally restructuring. It's a major overhaul of the way we work. And it's going all digital in a time where, it's a daring move. We'll see how it plays out. But definitely, we're not like channels. I think most of you guys, if you know a little bit about how public service organization organizes it, most of it comes from the BBC. So in the BBC sense, P1 is Radio 4, and I would be controller. You have commissioning editors, ordering content, and we sort of, what that has meant for public service organization is that we've been totally focused on the channels, and now basically we are an organization that will put produce content to our Sounds app and to our Play app. How that would play for radio is interesting, of course, because TV means a lot. And just in 1 year, we lost 20% of our viewers on TV, whereas radio, of course, has been super stable over the last 20 years. So we're moving very fast in the radio sense, and I think maybe a little too slow in a TV sense, but it's the urgency of the TV that defines who we are. So anyways, it was just a little correction. I'm not really head of P1 much longer. I have been demoted to television.
Okay, new winds are blowing. So what about France Info, Estelle?
So I will say that our slogan is the right news, not just news, and it is very important from France Info. It is the only news channel, continuous news channel in France. It was created in 1987. It's a public radio, and it's the first radio station in France. We are increasing. We did last year our best season in 15 years. So our audience, it fluctuates with the news, of course. So when you have a strong period of news, like terrorist attack in France, or this year with the presidential election, our audience increased a lot. Our audience is about 60 minutes a day for listener, because it's not a program news. So we are trying to keep them on our antenna as much as possible. So we don't have real program, it's continuous news. And also France Info, it's a global media. It's a radio from the Public Services Radio France. We have such a joint venture with our audiovisual group called France Télévisions. 5 years ago, we built the Media Global. We have a common website, and there is a channel called France Info on the TV. But it's not operated by France Info Radio. We just share some moment together. That's all.
So pretty much these are the promises that makes the audience come to you, keeps them on your channel, and what makes them come back. Sounds pretty good. And I'm not too familiar with the reality of your radio fields in your country, but sounds you're doing pretty damn great. So audio is on the rise, as we all know. It's very obvious, but it seems so is talk radio in this time. So what makes this format so popular in this very time? Nikolaj.
Honestly, I don't know. I couldn't tell you that, but I mean, I'll tell you what we do. We earned a huge audience during COVID, I think just the way in same sense that you did. And I'm a public service agent in the sense that I'm not there to earn an audience. I don't need it for public financing. So what I do need is to make a public, I have a sort of a job to do. And we actually earn too large an audience. So in everything we do right now, to be honest, is about trying to lose a little bit of our audience. And so sort of what I tell many of our hosts and many of our reporters is to say, it's okay to lose 10% of our audience if you gain 10% of their attention.
Okay.
And I think this is the conflict, I think, in this, what we're talking about, is that in a sense, linear radio is very much about being in the background, not disturbing people too much, being just enough present to make an audience, but not so much that they will change the channel. And I think what we need to do now is to raise their attention, be slightly more exclusive. So I'm not sure why talk radio is more popular. I think actually the most honest question I can give you is in a sense that over the last 15 years, the digitization of media has done that we've been so, we used fiercely every single moment of our day. There's no time left. We're on the screen all the fucking time. And radio was the last bit of time that we hadn't sort of misused and took up. So now there's a fierce fight for the last sort of corner of the world that has not been exploited.
Okay. What about you, Kamila?
Well, actually, in Poland, there is a very difficult political situation where basically two camps fighting each other. So right now we are so-called opposition radio, which means free radio because state media just broadcast propaganda. And so that's one of the reasons why people turned from public stations, whether it's television or radio, to us for the news. I'm not saying we are unbiased. We are kind of left-turned radio station. We concentrate very much on the social issues. We fight for LGBTQ rights, for example, for over 20 years, I think now, we've been having LGBTQ programs on air, well, dedicated to them, for example, but also women's rights, immigration rights, immigrants' rights, etc. So that's one of the reasons for our popularity. Another one is that we listen to the audience very carefully. So we, during the pandemics especially, we started plenty of call-in programs, so people could kind of air their grievances and ask the questions to the experts. So they knew they would be listened to, and they knew they would get professional answers to problems. So I think that's also one of the reasons they turned to us.
Yeah, what about you, Estelle?
Well, I think that in troubled times, that since maybe in France 5 years and all around Europe and worldwide, we are trying just to be a reference, to deliver, I mean, not real information, but as much as objective as possible. That was the most important for us. And that's why about 5 years ago we created an internal agency. I think our listeners and maybe all our audience on the website and everywhere, they are now they understood what we are doing. And it was very new for, I think, newspaper, radio, television, all the media to create such an internal agency to verify all the information. We decided it was a run between all the media with the website now, social media, television, radio, newspaper, they are all competitors in the same competition. It was not like this 20, 50 years ago, I mean, but now it's different. And when you're a news channel, everybody is in the race. And we decided just to calm down, not to be in the race, not to deliver an information as quick as possible, and to verify everything. So when a news is coming, if it's not maybe from Reuters or AFP, we just check the news and say, okay, the source is not good because it's not, you don't know who speak, maybe, and you don't, if the people or the source have to be relevant on the topic, and if it's not the case, our journalists verify all the information. And it is very important. Maybe sometime we take 5, 10, 20 minutes, 1 hour to deliver an information, and all the others they just give the information. But for example, when somebody dies, it's avoid us to do mistakes, for example. And I think it's one of the success of France Info, to be very strong on this, and not to be also an opinion channel. Only fact, just journalists report on the field, and that's all. So maybe I think it's what people are. They are looking at France Info.
Okay.
I kind of agree. I just say one thing. I mean,
Yep.
as a public broadcaster, we have a very high trustworthiness in our public, and of course, in a time of crisis, it totally plays in your favor. So I think that's what happens for us as well. Sort of, to put it in a very sort of nasty market capitalization, trustworthy over many years paid off in times of crisis. But I think there's also a problem in what you're saying, in the sense that we do too. We are one of the slowest media with news, and it's a good thing in a sense, but it also means that when thing happens, we are not the ones defining the conversation, and there's a conversation going on, and just waiting is not always the answer. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think there's a problem in that. There is a problem in a story going on, and you just sort of sit in your tower on yourself, sort of guarding your trustworthiness and not taking part in a conversation that's going on and that is defining the political reality.
No, it's easier. It's okay for us because we have a huge capacity of verification with many journalists from France Info, but also all the Radio France teams, France Bleu for the local, or France Inter, our main radio, but also all the television, because it's a joint venture with France Télévisions, so we can use all the journalists of the television teams, channels, so we go very, very fast. It's when an information comes, so we just put all the fuel in the machine, and every other journalist are looking, and it's quick. It's not, we do not take hours, so it's very, very rare. Only with some information, political, just from justice, but no, you're right.
And I'm jealous.
Thank you so much. We've had 15 minutes, and at the moment the swap card seems there are some questions, but not too much related on this. So, does anyone want to raise hand here and ask a question? Okay.
Does it work? Yes. Okay. Simon Prelesnik, Slovenia. Okay, we kind of all know why talk radio is on the rise, because bad news is good news, right? And we had an abundance of bad news in the last 5 years. But my question is, how do you solve the problems with sponsors? Because none of the sponsors wants to be related to any bad news, and on the other hand, you cannot talk bad about sponsor, right? So,
I guess,
what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you. Very good question. I think Kamila has a...
Well,
best answer to
actually,
this.
that's not true, I would say. Basically, the advertisers are not really scared about what we say about their products, because we do some programs on, I know, dietary supplements, and they are the biggest advertiser in Poland. And we are telling the truth, and they are in the blogs before, in the middle, and at the end. And also, you know, I would say that advertisers, they are not even scared about creating radio without advertisements, because we just recently created the stream that advertisements, premium stream, paid stream, that advertisements are replaced by music. And we can communicate it as no advertisement stream, and they are still okay with it. So I say if you got a good connection with your clients, and they know what products are they buying the ads in. So I don't think it's really a problem.
Okay, gentleman on the front, please.
Hello, Mathieu from France. Usually when we think about your competitors as talk radio, we always think about other radio stations. But today, and especially since then, third-party players like Spotify, Deezer, Apple are beginning to produce their own talk show. Do you consider them as competitors, or is it too soon for you to think that they could be a threat one day?
So the question really is, do we consider tech giants, Apple, Spotify as competition?
Those who produce content.
Yes. It's a twofold answer to that, I think. The first thing is that we've been part of, our content is very popular also as podcasts, and we have a large production of podcasts only. And in a weird sense, we've gone from sort of an ecosystem where that was rather transparent, it didn't have a monetization model. And as the monetization model comes in, we are sort of building their platforms, which is a weird thing. And you can see us sort of slowly being demoted from the front page of different platforms as they grow stronger with their own content and with all other kind of incentives, really, to promote their own content, other content that's not from public broadcasting, you know, because we will not have sort of pay into their monetization model. So the weird thing in Denmark, at least, is that every time we had new competition on linear radio, we've been growing for 10 years, and there were actually a number of new stations opening up, and we kept on growing, so competition has been good for us. It's been defining a market. So I don't consider other linear radio a competition, but I do consider like new podcast production as a major competition where I think we can lose. And when I said the thing about our organization before, about taking the sledgehammer and just wrecking the whole thing up, it's because today we're in a position where we reach 9 out of 10 Danes every single week. We reach 8 out of 10 Danes with news every single week. And it's a position that's been defined by linear radio, and TV broadcasting, and we are definitely in a position where we might lose that position. I mean, to transform that into digital reality might be a major challenge. So yes.
Yes, and I do think so too. I
Yeah.
think we compete for the same time, attention span, whatever. It's against television, against other radio stations, against any kind of sound that takes your time.
I agree. So we can't stay in our line today, maybe. And what I said that all the other newspaper, radio, TV channel are competitors. In France, we have 4 TV channels, continuous news channel. So, and France Info Radio is the only one. So our competitors is more this TV channel than others radio, I think. And we have to be to create as much as possible. I think that's why we made this joint venture with France Télévisions to be a radio, a website, social medias, and also a TV channel. Now we are going on TikTok. It's not always easy to have the good idea on all these platforms, because you can be old-fashioned, I mean, maybe our old radio sometimes. So we have to be very creative and to imagine new programs on this, maybe with a social assistant. For France Info, we're working a lot with social assistant, and maybe in car also. It's the future.
Vocal assistant?
Sorry.
Okay, let's get back to more questions later. Thank you very much for these. So let's talk about the programming and in the linear reality. Estelle, your channel is, I understood, 24/7 news radio. So how is the day built? I understood that you kind of don't have a program slot. It's a flow going on, the news flow.
Yeah.
So how is the day built there?
So it's a very structured antenna. If we just have 2 main programs, a political show in the morning, 25 minutes about at 8:30, with a politician most of the time, but sometimes it can be an artist or a football player or a business owner, but most of the time it's a politician. And we have another show called Les Informés. It's a talk show with 2 or 3 subjects, with journalists, communication specialists, and they are talking about news. But most of the time, it's periods of 2 or 3 hours with an anchorman, and it's only dedicated to news. And we structure the antenna. Our backbone are the title every 10 minutes. Every 10 minutes, you have 1 minute, 1.5 minutes of news with a roundup of all the news. And we just structure the antenna with a 30-minute period. You have a journal, 3, 5, or 10 minutes. And then you have the title. Then you have news development with guests or longer reports. Then you have the title, and then chronicle, 2 or 3, because our chronicle, it's about 3 minutes or 5 minutes. So, and all the time you have this period of 30 minutes, and we say it is from the hottest to the coolest in this period. So you begin with the hottest, the journal, and then you go to the chronicle, the coolest. So it is how the antenna is structured all the time, from 5 in the morning to 30 midnight in the evening. And it repeats like this. So in a period with an anchorman, you have maybe 3 hours, so you have 2 periods like this in each hour, and it's all the time like this. But of course, when you have a breaking news, we can destroy all this and make a permanent journal. So it's very structured.
Every basic program is swiped away, and you'll concentrate on
and the anchorman will do a continuous show. It will take everything coming from the feed, we are calling guests or interview, etc., and they will come everything. And it's a special edition. We have a special music for this. And it's very easy to to destroy all all this, all the program, and to say, okay, now it's a special edition. Everybody, all the radio, all the journalists are on this. So it's a very structured antenna. And I think that people, you know how people are just listening to us 1 hour, and we know that they are not coming 1 hour long. They are coming 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And what they want, it is a summary of the news. It's a title, 1.5 minutes. Then we know that they are coming for this. And we are trying to keep them on the radio. It's a main point for France Info. It's to keep people in our antenna more than 10 minutes, 20 minutes, because it is we say the reflex France Info. There is a news, people are coming, they are listening to us, and then they are leaving to radio program or music. So it's a big challenge for us.
Yes, Kamila, I understood that you have news broadcasts in every 20 minutes. Is it so? How long are these broadcasts?
It depends. The full hour broadcast is about 5-6 minutes, and 20 past and 22 are about 3-4 minutes. But, well, it's also very kind of strict structure. Unless we do transmission or unless we report on demonstrations like yesterday, for example, then we just transmit whatever is going on well, we want our listeners to be able to participate via us in such things. And we broadcast live premiere programming from 5 o'clock to midnight. And then from midnight to 5, the repeats of the best programs. But of course, we have live news then too, and we are ready to be back on there any moment if necessary. And of course, very often we are. And our programs usually take 2 hours, so it's like 6 pieces, but we actually award them only 5 pieces. It can be, you know, a piece can be a single talk, or a single talk can take 2 or 3. That means whole hour divided by news. So we are kind of flexible. We do not decide in advance how much we will award to I know, this subject. So, and we very often repeat the subjects because our journalists, you know, they are so different. They can approach the subjects from many sides. So if something is hot, if something is people talk about, we can talk about from, I don't know, economical point of view, from social point of view, from political point of view, etc. So we cover the subject during the whole day or whole weeks or whole years, really, and people do not get bored because it's different experts, different people who respond, etc. So, yeah, so that's it.
Nikolaj, I understood that.
I'm not the right person to ask about how to optimize on linear radio, but I can tell you this, like just really fast. We have like 4 live shows during the day that sort of defines the flow of the day. It's the morning show that matters the most. It's the 3 hours morning show on politics and news. And we go through the day. And I consider the rest of the day a playlist for podcast. I'm not quite there yet, but it's definitely the way we're going. And it's just because we just have that one set of amount of money to spend. We need to win the digitization. And I'm not sure it's the right strategy. I'd just like to point that out. The verdict isn't out yet. And they might come back in a few years and say I've screwed up a great radio station. But I think it's the right way to go, and it's the only way. And that's why I said before that I'm willing to lose some listeners and some listening time. We're not optimizing for listening time, because if you do that, there's a value proposition in that I think that you need to challenge. So how do we create the most value? Is that by radio going in the background for 6 hours? Is it someone downloading a podcast that they're listening intensely to in 30 minutes and getting enlightened about? And so there are some metrics here that we need to challenge, and one of them is listening time, for me at least. Okay. But so to do more digitization, basically we do a little more live radio, longer shows during the day, because it's cheaper. Podcast is expensive to succeed with. It is. And so we need to more live radio, slightly more in the cheap, to do more podcasts and more podcast success.
Yes. So if we're still talking about linear radio, even if it's FM, digital, anything, do you think in this time it should be live pretty much all the time, on the pulse all the time?
As I said, I don't know. We'll see in 5 years.
Yes.
We're trying to move away, to be honest. I mean, we're doing less live than we used to. So we have those 4 sort of live shows, long live shows,
Yeah.
3 hours, 2 hours long shows that defines the day. But in between that, of course, with the hourly radio news, we're trying to actually do less live.
Okay. We have a question from Swapcard from Dave Watson. Can you expand on this idea of a live on demand like Spotify Green Room? Is this the future of talk radio?
Well, what we do, for example, we actually cut our program and present it as podcasts, which are basically catch-up podcasts. But we also produce some podcasts just for the internet and for our audience. I think, well, we also do live programming like 90% of the time, probably. And it's also because our listening time is almost 3 hours daily, so we need to do variety of things to keep people with us. But I do think that our decision, it was like 4 or 5 years ago, to provide people with podcasts to catch up the programming and also to allow them to listen to radio whenever they want and wherever they want was a good choice. And we got 26,000 paying subscribers, so they don't pay to be allowed to listen to us whenever they want, and they also get access to our no ads stream.
Yes is the answer, but there's a civil war within our company, definitely, about how to do it and what role sort of Spotify and Apple iTunes should play. I think I myself is under the conviction that we need to be in control of our own destiny. That will lose a lot of listeners in the beginning. Head of podcast is over there. She might think quite differently, I think. So the verdict is not on that as well. But for me at least, I think you need to be sort of in charge of your own distribution.
For Info, for example, the most popular plays on demand are the titles on Vocal Assistant, for example, so that's what people want from us. It's not easy for a news channel to create a podcast offer because we have to stay in our line, not to offer things too far from what is France Info, what is a news channel. So we have some flow podcasts, we say, like about the presidential election, for example, or about, we have one called Complorama. It's about fake news and fight against disinformation. And we are producing it every two weeks a month. But it's not easy to find the right way because it's expensive. More and more journalists in our radio want to do podcasts because we are a news channel, so they are just making 1 minute or 2 minutes of reports, so they want more. They want 10 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe sometimes they are dreaming on this. But it's not easy to find something that is France Info. So we tried with a collection about Mars, for example, and now we are trying to do something about the environmental issues, but maybe we will find something. But it's expensive, so I don't know if it's the future. We have to do a balance between podcast and live show, I think, and the radio.
Okay, any questions in the conference room here in Lisbon at the moment? Swap card is pretty much empty at the moment. Just a second, the microphone is coming to you. We have about 10 minutes, and I think we'll try to talk about channel flow and personality and so on. But yeah, please.
Hello, I'm Andreas. I work for NRK in Norway. I have a question for Nikolaj in DR. It's the thing you said you have 4 live shows and the rest is like a playlist for podcasts, or it's becoming a playlist for podcasts.
Can you take off the mouth? I can't hear you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
That seems very different from many of the other radio channels that I've heard. Very different from what everyone else is doing. How has that affected your news coverage, and how do people within the people who create the content respond to that?
So what is different? Just I couldn't hear the first part. Just try again.
The fact that you have so little live shows, or so few live shows, how does that affect your news coverage day to day? At the start of Corona, for example, where there are new things happening every hour.
But it's little. I mean, it's few live shows, but they're very long live shows. It's a huge part of the day, and it's a slow twist, and we'll see how that changes. We have the hour news as well, and we also, I mean, whenever we have sort of we're pretty fast to move around in the schedule if something happens. I think my personal temper is maybe slightly faster than linear radio, so I think I break things a little faster than necessarily is a good thing. But I think we're able to move around pretty fast, actually. But that's what I'm saying. I'm not sure whether if it works. And definitely part of our success is that half of what we are is a news channel. It's definitely part of what we are in the definition. And the other part is a broader arts and culture and political current affairs. So there are these 2 parts, and we need to balance them out. I think it's the right thing to do. I think we need to. I think it's a great thing, actually. I really love the digitization. It's getting into the active beings, doing stuff that people are actually willing to take up their phone, open an app, search, find you in a setting of a million other offers. I mean, if you know you're doing important stuff, trustworthy, great news, that's what you want to do. And I think we actually had some success so far. We have the most popular news podcast in Denmark, which is the most listened to podcast in Denmark. We just did a podcast on the German election that was over 3 months period. Most of the time we're in top 10 of popular podcasts. I think you can do it, but one of the things actually that's hard is, as a public broadcaster, is that you have this trustworthiness. You're slightly boring, to be honest. You're that uncle that, it's great to talk to him sometimes when you need to get your facts straight and talk to Wikipedia stuff, but it's not really something that you would open up your phone for and search for, right? And so what we did on the German election was something that was very far away from sort of the sound of the channel. And I think that's definitely something we need to work on there that's difficult. But I think you can do news shows, even more nerdy news shows than you can on a news show, in a sense. But again, honestly, we'll see in 4 years.
Thank you.
Thank you for a good question and good answer. Let's make a very quick round, because when you're programming talk radio, it's sometimes pretty hard to create the smooth channel flow. I mean, that it doesn't sound like static talking. And I understand that, for example, if you have a news broadcast in every 10 to 20 minutes, it will make some kind of rhythm there. But for example, I've worked on Yle Puhe, which is Finnish talk radio, and we had a show called Ali Show, which was basically a 1-hour talk show. And I always wondered that why this program sounds like they are playing music, even if they don't. And I realized it was the rhythm changes. Mm-hmm. So quick round, how do you build a channel flow to talk radio, and what kind of elements and so on?
At France Info, our sound identity was designed by Jean-Michel Jarre. I know he did a show yesterday in Radiodays. He created a flow for France Info, and now we declined everything. For the clock, for example, we have an important clock, and then liners under the titles, our jingles, and when we create a new podcast, for example, we use it. When we create a new chronicle, we'll try to decline the Jean-Michel Jarre sound identity, I mean. So it's the only music you have on France Info. But I think with the title and this sound identity, with the clock especially, you recognize France Info and it creates something. I think.
Yes, Nikolaj.
Again, I mean, my major sort of strategic focus is not to focus on listening time. And I'm honestly, again, you know, when I was just appointed, there was a woman, a friend of mine, who was listening to the radio a week. She was painting her apartment, and she was like, it was good. So she'd been listening to the radio like 48 hours nonstop. And she's like, it's great. It was informative. I loved it. It was all good. But it's also like the sound of it was like it's just one program going on forever. And it's the exact opposite that we need to do to succeed in a digital world. And so I'm okay with that. And so far it plays out well. That news podcast I told you about has a total different sound than the channel. And we put it in, and it is playing out pretty well. And it does sound a little weird, and it doesn't really have the same ring. And I think it's okay. But again, I mean, I don't need to make my own money. They've driven into me in a car every year. So it's a much easier thing that I'm in a position to say that I don't need to earn a bigger audience. The truth is, Denmark is a great country, but I mean, for the radio scene, and I don't mention this number very often, because it makes us sound like an ex-Soviet state, we have a market penetration of almost 80% of the radio market as a public broadcast, and it's too much. So I don't mind literally losing a little audience if I get a little more attention.
Well, for us, it's like for the other radio stations. You need to have some musical identification, I would say, which we, of course, interpret in different ways. But what we also do, and I think you might find it of interest, is we call it InfoTalk, because it's quotes from politicians, from events, etc., that we kind of make short story of. So we use it to remind people that we are following the stories. We remind people what have been said and how it's been said, and of course it's with music, with the sounds, etc. So and people love it. I can tell you, they actually ask us to put it on our application as separate broadcasts, separate podcasts.
Let's make a quick round. The personalities are important on talk radio, on your channel or in your content, neutral or provocative? Estelle?
I would say we are like 70% neutral and maybe 25 provocative, and then 2% controversial, but you know, we are licensed on the market, so we are very carefully watched, and we still get plenty of feedback from the audio council that we are breaking the rules. So we need to be very careful, because it's one of ways to lose license if something is said in a wrong way, happens with wrong words, etc. So we need to be very careful.
Okay,
Yeah.
but they are important. Estelle?
Yes, among all our values there is impartiality. So we are very, very neutral on France Info. No editorialization, no provocation at all. So our uncommon, there is no stars, no personality. Maybe only in the morning show, maybe people may know that it's Marc Fauvel, but he's not so well known in France. So it's very, very neutral. We are trying to deliver information as much objective and impartial as possible. And it is a very important point, especially now with our presidential campaign, because more and more radio, but also TV, are becoming, I think, opinion television with opinion program, not news program. So And I think we have to stay in this line and stay neutral. I think our audience is coming for this. So that's his France Info.
Nikolaj.
We come from the same space, in a sense. I just think we need to move out of it also, in the sense that trustworthiness is necessarily, it's absolutely bottom and bread, it's what you need. But I think where we need to compete, on the other hand, is to get out of that. I don't think provocative is the right word. I just say, like, when I took over this channel, it had a tagline called "That Makes Sense," and I really hated it. It was the first thing I killed it all, and it was because it sounds sort of like I got this image from it. It's like the world is a puzzle, and you take the last piece, and you're like, "That makes sense," and things fall into place. And I really don't think it's the right way to do. It's not our job to tell people that the world is okay and makes sense, because it doesn't. And it's not the right way to work, because you make people stop listening. And so to answer your question very short and very brief, I think coming from the safe space of trustworthiness, sort of moving a little out of it.
Thank you so much. Our time is up for now, but I guess we'll continue this at some point on part 2. And I'm sure you'll have time to answer questions if people here have something they couldn't made it to fit to this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kamila, Nikolaj, and Estelle, and the wonderful audience here in Lisbon and online. Thank you.